Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Grabfelder. Welcome to part 2 of our EA Zoom panel discussion on the planetary shifts of 2025. Today, we're joined by Marty Dixon, Rob Shahal, Maria O'Neill, and Sue Hilliard. And we're going to start off with a chart for Neptune entering Aries. Marty, would you like to bring up that chart?
Okay, let me start my share here. And do you see my screen?
Yes, I see the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction, and thank you, Robin, and thank you, Sue, and ladies, thank you for being here and all of our audience. And this is based on a lecture that the slides from this lecture are actually from June of last year, so they're somewhat they kind of tell a story about what we were thinking a full year ago, and they're somewhat predictive and interesting. So that's why I showed this beginning screen. It's what we came up with, last June, and I think it's very telling. Okay, this is where I'm going to start, and I want to read this really quickly. One of the people that I'm going to start and stop with and end with is an incredible physician and scientist and geneticist and biologist and humanitarian by the name of Zach Bush. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but if you haven't, you're going to want to, because we have so much going on now that there's people that are brilliant, that are using their brilliance in the wrong way, and there's people that have tremendous gifts and are using them in the right way. And Zach Bush is one of those incredible scientists and pioneers and future thinkers that's actually using his talent and his God-given talents to better humanity. So it's a choice, if you're given incredible talent, which way you want to go with it, and he's using it for the betterment of all of us. It's a choice. But anyway, this is something he wrote, and I'm going to read it very quickly. We know this, but we do not remember this. At the moment of conception, there's a lightning strike. One of the brightest things that happens in the universe is the moment of conception, called the white flash. It's so bright that we don't even know it happens, where it comes from, or why it releases itself as white energy. You become at that moment an opportunity to express yourself in a finite way. Your cells begin to divide. Energy that can neither be created or destroyed. Does that sound familiar? The soul is immutable energy. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed, are Jeffrey's words. And the fact that energy can neither be created or destroyed, it can only be transformed, is the first law of thermodynamics. The cells follow this electromagnetic blueprint deep within the cell, and a heart begins to beat. And we know this because we know this, but we do not remember this. It's in our cellular memory only, buried deep beneath our unconscious minds. And the moment that you were conceived, there was a bright flash that came from somewhere, and that lightning strike is you. There has to be a memory, a cellular memory of who you are that is deeper than the cellular structure, that allows you to project that sunshine to the world around you. Sunshine from the atmosphere was put into your cells and released at an intensity 10,000 times brighter than a cubic centimeter of the sun. Children see each other that way. When you were born, the earth was there to hold you. I'm going to get emotional. You were born naked and needing to cuddle. And you are the creation force. I'm going to get probably pretty emotional through this whole. Okay. And then, of course, the father of relativity, and that's what Jack is referring to, is the fact that everything is relative, and everything that comes to us has already been there, and it always will remain, and we're just a part of the incredible process. And I really love this quote where he says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And I'll try to be really quick. There are so many levels of consciousness on Earth nowadays, and you can look at two of the same charts, and one can be worlds away from the next one. One can be super evolved, and one can be, so to speak, lesser evolved. And that's what we're dealing with right now, is an incredible display or distribution of consciousness on all different levels. And it takes practice, and it takes acceptance, and it takes tolerance of our neighbors. Pluto, bear with me just a moment. Let me see if I can read this. Bear with me just a moment. Pluto in Aquarius and the age of Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is about a 20-year span, and I can't read it, but let's see. Bear with me just a moment. It's about a 20-year span and heralds the age of Aquarius. Neptune's north node is in Leo, and south node is in Aquarius. The age of Leo was approximately, oh dear, bear with me just a moment, was approximately 10,900 BC to 8,740 BC, the times that the pyramids were built in ancient Egypt, according to John Anthony West and Graham Hancock, who computed that the deluge, or the Great Flood, took place approximately 12,800 years ago, which would make it about 10,800 BC. An age is roughly 2,000 years. It's really we compute it as 2,160. This coming age of Aquarius then would be, mathematically speaking, 2060 to 4220 AD. Bear with me just a moment. Got to find my place here. Pluto's second ingression to Aquarius. This is the second ingression of Pluto to Aquarius in 2024. And I will say that this one that we're looking at right here was on January 20th of 2024. And let me find my cursor here, 2024. Pluto's last passage through Aquarius was between 1777 and 1798, when the world's balance of power shifted. These decades saw the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Pluto's last ingression to Aquarius was on November 19th of 2024. And right now, I just want to point out, because this is really important on some level, and don't worry if it's too much for you, it will sink in on some level. And I'm really wanting to get this information out. It's a lot of what Jeffrey taught. Right now, with the south nodes of Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus, they're in Capricorn and Sagittarius. And also the south node of Neptune is in Aquarius. And the nodes of Capricorn and Cancer, or the nodes of Pluto, have been in Capricorn Cancer from 500 AD to 2500 AD, approximately 2,000 years. And that's important to know because they move very slowly. Pluto has an orbit of roughly 249 years. We already said that it entered Aquarius in March of 2023, and then again on January 20th, 2024 was actually that was the first time that it entered into Aquarius. And then its final ingress to Aquarius was November 19th of 2024. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was between 1778 and 1798. Again, the American Revolutionary War took place between 1765 and 1783. That's very important, and I'll get to that in just a moment. The protests of the American Revolution War began in opposition to taxes levied without colonial representation. It's something to think about, and where we are today. America's Declaration of Independence was signed July 14th, 1776, and the signing of the Declaration will be 249 years old by this July 4th, 2025, a Pluto return. Pluto is also polarization. In Aquarius, polarization of political ideologies can occur with the collective evolutionary intent to balance excesses of power and direct that power back into the hands of the people. I wrote this in June of last year. No matter what, there will be challenges to excess and privilege in all governing bodies here and in the world. My goodness. Worldwide elections have been questioned, contested, and redone or overturned. I'm going to talk as quickly as I can, but Germany really found Russian evidence of, fraud in their election, and they had to do their re-election over again. And many European countries are finding that to be a common occurrence. And now we have absolute proof that the Germans infiltrated the 2016 American election and tried to change it, or did have an influence.
Russians, Marty, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Russians
The Russians, yeah.
Yeah.
They were the part of the Russian government, not the Russian people, but part of the Russian government. It's unmistakable now.
Yeah.
So,
And they also, Romania just recently
yeah.
redid theirs.
So revolution of some type is certainly inevitable. We're in the midst of revolution right now, whether whether it's fighting in the streets or a revolution of consciousness and ideologies. We're in a revolution right now. We need a hero. We need good men and women to speak up and stand out. I can speak to that more, but I don't want to really include that in this lecture. But I can speak to that if anybody has concerns about what they can do. I can certainly speak to that. We must counter the violence of militias, denounce dictatorship, my goodness, and the seeds of such in all of its forms, no matter how subtle, and shore up our Constitution to continue to be a safe and governing nation that our children can be proud of. Okay. Let's see where
That's
we are
pretty
here.
powerful, considering that,
Well, we wrote it last year.
Yeah, that you wrote it that long ago. But
the nodes of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto real quickly move very, very slowly. And I want people to know this because really the beauty of astrology, it sinks in on some level. It really, truly does. So I want to get this out. And if I need to repeat it or skip over some parts and include them later, I will do so. But this is really basic stuff, and it really does help. It really does help. Thus, we have a generational as well as an individual application with the nodes. Let's see here. The south nodes of Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn are in Capricorn for all of us right now. Historically speaking, remember they will have been there for 2,000 years. And that is the time frame in which the transition between the matriarchy and the patriarchy occurred. That was basically when the nodes shifted to the south node of Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter shifted to Capricorn. Yeah, Capricorn. And that was between 6,500 and 5,500 BC, relatively. All souls on Earth are linked to that time, whether they actually lived at that time or not, but a lot of us did. It is a collective memory of that time that all souls will draw upon as reflected in the current life that they are living. And I think I'll just go ahead and leave that there. If somebody wants to read it, they can pause it and read that there. Yeah. And so as we can see right here, if you can see my cursor right here, from relatively 500 to 2500 AD, the south node of Pluto has been in Capricorn and the north node in Cancer. And it's very important to know. It's really, I really mean it when I say it sinks in on some level. If you look at it and think about it and dream about it and just meditate on that, you're going to start to understand it. Okay. Nodes to Pisces, Virgo. Anybody can take this that wants to, but I just wanted to put in that the nodes to Pisces, Virgo began on January 11th of 2025. I'll just say that the nodal axes by way of their retrograde motion apply pressure to the next sign or planet. This is how we individually and collectively get the lesson on a somatic level. On an internal level, I meant to say internal, on an internal level, and carry it with us. We are changed. Our very DNA is changed when the nodes transit transit like a major planet like the nodes are right here at the beginning of January, applying pressure to Neptune, for instance. That changes Neptune, and Neptune is the planet of quantum appearance and quantum occurrences. And what's happening when the nodes transit Neptune is we are changed. We are changed from the inside out, and we are forever changed. And we get the lesson on a very, very deep internal level. So a new birth of consciousness is certainly at hand. And I want to go over this really quickly. I will do it as quickly as I can. But Pluto entered tropical Aquarius for the next 20 years in January of 2024. Pluto will next enter sidereal or actual Aquarius sometime between 2044 and 2062, according to astronomers. So sometime starting around 2044, it's believed to be the real ushering in of the Aquarian age. But Jeffrey said that we are on the cusp between the Piscean and Aquarian ages regardless, and nothing's exact. And when he taught us in the 90s, he said that we were on the cusp of the Aquarian age, give or take a few hundred years. It's all relative. Not going to go too much into this. You can read it and pause it if you want to. As the age of Pisces draws to a close, its ruling planet Neptune in its home sign is intensifying and focusing in on the highly balsamic and culminating times that we live in. Boy, do we ever, especially for the spiritually aware. What a wild ride it has been, and it will be, continue to be. In short, the backward movement of precession, or the nodes of the moon, or retrogrades, and to a large part Neptune herself, feed our internal realizations, our epiphany, our revelation, and our dreams, as opposed to the direct solar position of the luminaries like the sun and the planets, which tend to direct us in a more conscious, focused, problem-solving state of mind. So we're in for a wild ride with our dreams and our meditation. Don't think I'll go too much into this. I just want to talk about, I want to touch on Atlantis. I'll just do this one paragraph because not a lot of people know what Jeffrey said about it. This is Jeffrey's words. There was a corruption factor at the end of the civilization of Atlantis, similar to this very point in time. A violation of natural law. I'm getting emotional. At the end of the civilization of Atlantis, they witnessed rebellion against authoritarian forms of power. And what happened, I remember so much of what he told us about it. He told stories. He would go somewhere in his head and just tell stories. And he said that what it was, it came down to very few people that were in power, and they were distorted and full of anger and competition and manipulation. And these people went a bit mad and turned things for the worse for the civilization of Atlantis. And, it didn't last very long after that. We're at that same point in time right now, whether we're going to make it or break it. And he said that there was there were priests that helped save a lot of people before the destruction of Atlantis, before great waves overtook it, like a great shaking of an earthquake, and then it sort of sank into the ocean. But there was a priest caste and priests that were as many as the ruling class, and they helped the people to safety, many of them. They had premonition of what was going to happen, and they had boats available. An operation much like a lobotomy was performed by those higher up to try to change humans into social automatons. And they experimented with genetics, and gene manipulation took place that was way out of bounds. Toward the end of the civilization of Atlantis, which began some 24,000 years ago and lasted some 12,000 years, a radical shift in consciousness occurred. And this shift in consciousness always precedes the beginning process of a new age, where we are right now. For instance, fanatical religiosity, fundamentalism, fear and guilt, superiority, a lot of hierarchy, and a lot of exclusivity, just a lot of fear-based tactics that people come into of lower vibration, you might say, The Virgo subage of Pisces and the current nodal axis represent the perceived separation between flesh and spirit. Jeffrey taught us there is no separation, and the realization that one does not have to suffer to become spiritual. So those of us that are growing by leaps and bounds and realize that there's many levels of consciousness on earth right now, we want to be patient with those that are in fear or think that they have to, go to great lengths to become spiritual. Grace is extended freely to all. You don't have to do anything or be special or be special good, and you don't have to worry about what you feel in the flesh and what you feel in the spirit, because they're one and the same. They go together, and don't worry too much about guilt and all of that. This is where I kind of get into it. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. So I just want to say this because it's necessary. When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. Thomas Jefferson. He was one of the signers of the original Constitution, and the people who signed the original Constitution, the whole story is utterly fascinating. If you really dig and look into history, it wasn't an easy time. I'm not going to go into the stories right now, but it's so much likens today. One thing I'll tell you is that it's been related that Benjamin Franklin was one of the original drafters of the Constitution, and he wrote like crazy and scribbled like crazy to try to get everything done in good time when everyone was gathered around. And believe it or not, he had young men around him, like 18, 19, and early 20s. And he had a cadre of young men that were giving him information and saying, no, do it, write it this way, write it that way, and asking questions. And they worked feverishly to get that document done, because they had to get it done within a certain amount of time. And it was signed on July 4th, 1776. But it's interesting to me that this mastermind, Benjamin Franklin, who was maybe a bit of a character, also had these young men around him. It sort of likens the brilliancy of Elon Musk and his young cadre, and how they could either use their abilities for good or for detriment. It's all a choice. Why not use your talent for the better of all people? Oligarchy is a governance by a few at the top. Plutocracy is a country or society governed by the wealthy. Kleptocracy, also referred to as thievocracy, is a government whose corrupt leaders use political power to expropriate the wealth of the people. Now, there's nothing new under the sun, and I just wanted to point that out because these are well-known terms and they're being used an awful lot today. They're being thrown around, and this is all real. This is really happening around us. We have to be aware of it and talk about it. This is one of my graphics. Okay. So Venus is gone retrograde. It goes retrograde every 18 months. It will go retrograde on March 1st. I'm sorry. Got a little bit ahead of myself. If anybody wants to talk about the Venus retrograde on March 1st to April 12th, please do. Please go for it. Rav?
Sorry, I had to find out where the unmute button was. Thank you, Marty. That was really educational. I'll have to go back and read the slides in depth myself. I just wanted, before I go on to the Venus retrograde, I want to just add on to the nodal shift that you spoke about, especially as it aligns to Neptune, with the north node of the moon going into Pisces. I do feel that we are at that spiritual revolution point where collectively and individually we're either going to repeat the patterns of our past, or we have an opportunity to surrender and have a little bit more faith in what's coming up in terms of the changes we need to make. I know we're going to speak about Neptune moving into Aries, but at this particular point, with the Venus retrograde station as well in Aries, it's like you can all feel it, right? You can just feel a little bit of the urgency. There's so much going on. You actually don't know what we're looking at and where we're placing our energy. And I feel the nodal axis at this point in time is telling us to slow down, even meditate, go within first. So this Venus retrograde phase is going to be asking us, go within, see what the values are, see what it's aligning to. And it's about not reacting to events that are happening around us. Because trust me, there's anger boiling around. I was just explaining to the ladies before we started recording, for some reason, the last couple of days, there's a lot of agitation coming up. It's like, who am I angry at? And luckily, there's a conscious awareness of it. Otherwise, we can just react. And that's never going to produce a good result. So this Venus retrograde station that's just happened yesterday in terms of the UK, is the focus is slow down. The ruler is Mars in Cancer. So you can see where the agitation is coming up. And it's self-reflection. It's also having emotional maturity to kind of reflect on, why am I getting angry? And how do I direct this anger effectively? Where there's actually a purpose and not just a reaction. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And part of it also adding on to that is that Mars just turned stationary direct as well in Cancer. And so we were talking about having that pit in our stomach, which is ruled by Cancer, and just a feeling of anger, but not knowing exactly where it's coming from. And now as Mars picks up speed, it's the action is coming out, and the you're right, the anger is being expressed.
And it's
Yeah.
valid. It is valid. We can't suppress the anger. We need to let it out, but it's constructive, right? It's about knowing how we can direct how the changes that we need to make, how we can do it individually in terms of affecting it collectively.
Mhm.
We know what's been happening in the world recently and what's been going on the last few weeks. But rather than reacting to that, it's not giving it energy and power, right? As well. It's turning it around and saying, okay, this doesn't work. So what does work? And what action, that Aries element, can I take to help the collective?
Mhm. Yeah, I like what you said there, Rav. And Venus is about, of course, we know relationships, and it's all about what is right relationship to everything, whether it's our mates, our friends, our work, our government. What is the right relationship? Venus, on the esoteric level, actually rules Gemini. And, part of the reason for that on the esoteric level is because, when we look at the glyph for Gemini, it is you've got two straight lines, and it's two sides of the same coin, really. It's looking at each other. Whereas when Venus comes in as the ruler, it's the higher mind marrying the lower mind, higher consciousness, the higher the spirit marrying and merging with the lower mind so that you can operate together. One of the things that Venus is well aware of is in the right relationship is that we're not separate. We only think we're separate. And so we argue, and it's good to have good arguments and good conversation. We as humans, for the most part, have never been taught or never learned how to have an argument. We just get mad and we just express that but when you learn, what's it called? When you learn to negotiate, which is something that is also, really, really prominent with Gemini and with Venus in Libra, it is negotiation. It is taking the middle ground. And that is what Venus wants us to do, because we get, you look at our politics And it's always, and we've got this dividing line, left versus right, when in fact there is truth in both. I'm not saying that, and there's also discord in both. And our work is to walk the middle ground. That is, I believe, what Venus really wants us to do. And when she's in Aries, we're having to revisit all of, these relationships. And what are we willing to fight for? Are we willing to fight for what is good for the collective, or what is good for the few, or what is good for me? Anyway, that's my view. And of course, the other thing with Venus and Mars being in Cancer, it's a signature. It's one of those signatures too of the mother of us all being awake, because she was in, for the 5,000 year period, according to a lecture that I attended with Demetra George. She talked about the cycles of the moon and looking at them with when the patriarchy came into control, and it was about 5,000 years ago. And if you look at a 5,000 year cycle, she's saying that if you're looking at 8 cycles, then the mother energy was in the balsamic phase, and now she is back in a new phase. And one of the things that the great mother, through Venus, through the moon, through all of the goddesses, really wants for us is to marry the masculine and the feminine, because it's neither one or the other. She is pregnant with both.
That's great. Can I interrupt just for a sec? Marty, can you make your presentation full screen so that the image is a little bit bigger? Thank you.
Coming right up any second here. There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you, ladies. That was wonderful. I just want to mention this one paragraph that you see Venus here in Aries stationing retrograde, and it's moving back toward Pisces and Neptune and that Pisces stellium. And I think that can be a little bit, it can feel, it's so emotional and it's so hypersensitive that it can feel helpless. And of course, what Venus is stationing to do is go retrograde for a while and go back into that futility. What can I do? What difference do I make? What do I do? And I could definitely speak to that on a personal level, but there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can do, and Venus will again, it's kind of readdressing before it goes direct again. It's kind of gathering steam, and understanding and value before it goes direct and begins to act again. And that's very promising to me, because there's a lot that people can do that are scared and frustrated right now, and with good cause. When anybody asks me how I'm doing, I say I'm fine. I've been fine all my life, but I'm not okay. I'm not okay with the world situation and what's going on. So Venus retrograde can force people back upon themselves to take stock of their personal resources, family, friends, and communities, and to start to look after children, elderly, and disenfranchised. So there's a little bit of a hidden gem in every difficulty, right? Because now we're kind of thinking, well, who's next door and who can I help and what can I stock up on? And, how can I really take stock of my resources and what I need to take care of myself and be self-sufficient? So I put this in here, and I'm not going to read it, but you can, like I said, you can pause it and read it. This is one of the best advices for our future. I think that this was handed down in the late 80s. I think it was 1987, as I recall, on the Hopi Reservation, to a woman that visited there and transcribed it. But it's just really saying things to consider. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships, as Marie said? Are you in right relation, as Marie said? Where's your water? Know your garden. It's time to speak your truth, create your community, be good to each other, and do not look outside yourself for the leader. And he clasped his hands together and said, this could be a good time. So when we learn the hard lessons that we need to learn to be resourceful and that really honor that Venus and that goddess energy, it can be a good time. Hard, no doubt, but good. So let's see, where am I now? Let's
Michelle,
see.
did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for that, Sue.
Oh, hi, Michelle.
Hi, Marty. I can go with this slide too, or go back to the Venus retrograde, because I think um what I wanted to speak about relative to the Venus retrograde, I always think of what Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about in terms of the retrograde archetype, that it is an internalization of that function, of the Venusian function, and it is an acceleration of evolution. And why, of course, then would we be in a period right now where Venus is retrograde? In a few days, Mercury will be retrograde. We will be in between, we'll be sandwiched in these eclipses with the retrograde cycles. And it's all happening on this cusp of Pisces and Aries, the last sign of the zodiac and the first sign of the zodiac. So there's a very critical initiation that's underway from a soul perspective, and from an individual and a mundane perspective. That irritability that you were talking about earlier, I've been super tuned into that. And, with Mars in Cancer direct now, but still in its shadow, ruled by the moon, right? And ruling that Venus that's retrograde. Part of what is occurring through this is the real acceleration of evolution through the emotional body, right? And I was thinking earlier today, well, why is that? Why do we accelerate evolution through the emotional body? Because the extension of the ego, the feeling body, the identity that we have in the world is the very core limitation to our evolution in relationships to others, in how we relate to the earth and all its creations, how we relate to our source and our creator. And we have to break through those past emotional patterns before we can move forward in our lives towards any kind of peace, towards any kind of emotional healing. And I received this message in a dream recently where I was writing on a whiteboard, and I wrote, transformation in relationship is equal to emotional self-responsibility plus intimacy and connection. Like intimacy and connection, almost like an algebraic equation. How do we transform relationships? And this, I think, applies to the relationship to the self, because when we're dealing with Aries, we're dealing with my will, my desires, what I want, what I need in relationship, how I feel instinctively impulsive to create my life, right? And if that has been stifled in our relationships, if we have been struggling with that, if we have been stuck in patterns of reactivity, there is a deeper underlying need for healing, which happens on the other side, right? The Pisces side, which is I surrender to, to a power greater than myself, to faith, to the universe, to be guiding really this connection that I have to ultimate meaning of why I'm here, what I'm doing, what is all this about? And when we merge those two, when we are sort of dancing on the edge of those two realities, my will and God's will, or my will and thy will, right? Yeah, it can definitely bring up feelings of disillusionment, which I've just really been linking disillusionment to grief so clearly in these last few months, to that process of letting go that we're all in on some sort of collective level, right? We're whether we're aligned with the status quo or rebelling against the status quo, or we're aligned with a higher consciousness, or we're resisting, it doesn't matter where we lie on that spectrum. We're all undergoing this pull towards evolution. I think all beings experience evolution regardless of what state of consciousness they're at. And with Venus and Mercury specifically, like this is the ways that we think, this is what we feel, this is how we deal with our money, our resources, relationship. So I feel like we have this really powerful opportunity during this window of time from March until April to sort of get on board. It's like if you're Aries is the surfboard and Pisces is the wave. And you literally have to be on your board and using your whole will and desire to stay in alignment. Otherwise, you're going to get thrown off into the water. It's just bound to happen. And the better you are at surfing, right? The more practice you've had at this, the easier it will be, but everyone's on the wave and everyone is in some way, shape, or form is going to get wet. So
Well, yeah, and
That's great, Michelle.
that is so good. I love it.
Michelle, I
Yeah.
just had an image. I just had a massive image. What's the day that Venus goes back into Pisces?
Oh,
Because I feel like on that day, we better be on that board. Or trying to be on that board.
it's actually super close to that that next slide that
Was
it's
it
right
the,
when
yeah, Neptune and Aries?
tips into Aries, Venus
Oh,
back
I
in
can.
Pisces. They like swap places in
Yeah.
her second conjunction. I'm just looking here.
And Mercury and Neptune do the same thing. Mercury goes back into Pisces as Neptune is going into Aries.
So
see.
March 26th, and adjust for your time zone, Venus is at 0 degrees Aries. The 27th, she's conjunct Neptune and crosses over. So it's that time period. And then let's see, 29th, 30th, Neptune enters Aries and Mercury enters Pisces. And I just find it totally fascinating also that Mercury is, following Venus this whole time, doing this sort of, they're both doing this dance around the North Node saying, sink or swim, fight or flight, do what you want, but we're all going to evolve. No one's getting off.
And they're
Fight the
also
contractions.
the rulers of the nodes as well.
Exactly. That's exactly. Sue, you're on to my next point, which is, Mercury's ruling the South Node. So much of what we can do in facing the past, our triggers, the feelings, the places where we're just really strong in what we know or we want or really lost on the other side by what's happening, really confused, can be the exact places that we can transmute where we've been caught, and I'm a Gemini moon, so I can hold this duplicitous thinking about the world. I know I have fellow Gemini moons here in the room. We can hold like, okay, there's fear and there's love, there's this and there's that. Those polarities exist naturally. But what we're doing through the South Node in Virgo is purifying and releasing all that guilt, all that conditioning, right? All that. Yeah. And we get to do that via the North Node, via that surrender. And then I think, especially with Neptune entering Aries, there's some critical initiation that comes in where it's not about my will versus thy will or the self versus the other. It has to become in that there is only one. That kind of unity, whether it's in our relationship to the partner that we struggle to love versus hate, whether it's in relationship to the political party that seems to be dismantling all of our options for hope, whether it's in relationship to the family that we come from, where we've been conditioned to behave in a particular way and we just can't live that way anymore. Whatever it is, whatever our polarity is in relationship to, once I think Neptune's in Aries, it becomes not an option to think of self or other. And that might appear as though there's, all the selves, all the big selves of the world are running the world. When I mean, if we remember that we all come from one source and we return to that source, then we can know that that's an illusion.
Mhm.
Self
Well,
too.
it's also about us as individuals recognizing and integrating our own authentic power, our
Absolutely.
personal power, and what that is for each of us. You know, I don't remember whether it was you, Michelle, or Rav talking about Pisces in that you feel powerless and helpless. Actually, Pisces has tremendous power. Its power is not grounded in this world, but it is a power. It's an authentic power because it sees the whole, it sees the collective consciousness on its highest level. Because at some point, you know, and we also know that each of the signs is an antidote to the previous sign. So when you've got that Pisces energy, when it is operating at its highest, which is what we aim for, then Aries can come in and give the sparks of insight from the divine, because Aries is that dot. It is where the information from the divine, which is our consciousness, comes into awareness. Even though Aries is a fire sign, it is still it rules the head. So it's still mental and it is thought. And it has to, you know, so we've got each of the signs helping to manifest um, what is brought through Aries, helping to manifest it here on the earth plane. So I see the two together in a way as spiritual warriors, but spiritual warriors for the collective, for the collective consciousness, for humanity. If you're, you know, that's, and so when I look at what's going on, I have to look at it from the viewpoint of, okay, what is this? Why is this happening in relation to humanity? What is it that we need to evolve to? Because there is always a cause and effect. There is always a reason for whatever it is that is happening, whether it's we perceive it as good or not. And what are we supposed to learn? What are we supposed to learn about ourselves? What are we supposed to learn about our own individual powers and our own uniqueness? Have we put too much power into the other, into government, into um, people that other people, it's like giving our power away. We've done that for so long, and we have to bring that power back and realize that we are quite powerful as individuals, regardless of what sign we are. But anyway, that's the way I see it.
Beautiful, Marie. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is, "What man intends for evil, God intends for good." And we often, see that in these heightened times of accelerated change, that appearances are not what they appear to
Oh,
be. And we have
oh,
to gain hope.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you look at what happened in Tibet. That was an atrocity, what happened to the Tibetan people. At the same time, Buddhism would not be as widespread if you had to go to the Himalayas to study all the time. And so the Dalai Lama had to come out, for his life. But then look at what good came of that. I mean, um, or even Atlantis. If Atlantis had have survived, how would we have evolved? Um, it's a question. It's a question a Gemini sun would ask.
And I got to it. May 2nd is Venus direct conjunct Neptune in Aries at 1 degree. So when we get all the way through this whole retrograde, she will have made 3 conjunctions to Neptune.
Mm,
First being her direct conjunction to Neptune in the North Node, which I think happened in late February.
mm-hmm.
And then the second being the retrograde conjunction to Neptune in Pisces, and the third being the direct conjunction to Neptune in Aries.
And what's the feminine aspect of Neptune?
Venus, Neptune is the higher
Oh,
octave.
that's right. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah, and by then Mars is in Leo, past its opposition to Pluto, direct past shadow degrees, and I think what you're saying, Maria, about this, it really points to that aspect that we're going to be focusing on the next 20 years of our creative self-actualization. The unique, divine, creative potential of each human being gets to emerge, and through that power, the world is changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's continue. Oh, that was great, both of you. And Michelle, yes, my dear, absolutely.
And
So here it
love
is.
the Atlantis. I love the Atlantis part. I have to say I'm really taken by, well, I love Atlantis anyway, and I think this is incredible that you brought it in with the ages and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey talked about a galactic return, and he said we are where we were then because at the end of Atlantis, that was the end of that Piscean age and ushering in a new Aquarian age. That would have been 24,000 years ago, some 24,000 years ago.
The last
Yeah, so
time,
you were
the last
probably
time
all
we
there.
moved from Pisces to Aquarius, in other
And
words.
he went into great detail. He
Okay.
told so many stories. Oh man, I wish I had the time, but
I bet we were all there.
oh
the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
Yes.
He said that's why you remember it is because you were there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
We'll have to have a whole meeting.
oh yeah,
about-
let's do an Atlantis because I've got lots of notes. Okay, so
That sounds awesome.
I'll
Let
put a
me
little
see.
plug in for the Venus class series coming up. Rav and I will be with the association leading a deep dive into Venus, as Jeffrey taught.
All right.
Her aspects, her sexuality, the teachings that he gave on sexuality, and how that's linked to evolution, because it is part of the revolution of this time. In particular, one of the places where our creative self-actualization comes from is our sexuality and our relationship to ourself in that way, and our relationships to others. So we'll be spending the next 6 months diving into his teachings on that. So
And when does that start, Michelle?
it starts March 15th. It's just in a couple of weeks.
We'll put a something in the description of the video to point to it on the JWG AEA
Website.
sign up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
can everybody see this chart?
Yes.
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 Okay, so we're getting into Neptune and Aries, and March 30th of this year, close to the vernal equinox, which is really interesting to me. Seems appropriate somehow. And joining the stellium in Pisces and Aries, that includes the North Node. This marks the beginning of a whole new evolutionary cycle for Neptune. It's incredible. It's a little bit scary because it's the unknown, and you can only kind of know it on a feeling level, a deep internal level. But still, one thing that Jeffrey really stressed, and I don't have that slide prepared, but I do have the slide, is that he talked about in these end times how you better get in touch with your internal compass, and the internal compass is the heart, and the way to your internal knowingness is through the heart, and that's your doorway to Neptune, so to speak. And he says you got to go inside and you got to really feel, because we've got some really rocky surfs ahead, as Michelle put it. And he said you better learn to put sand in those shoes so you can hang on, stay grounded, stay on the earth. And he would just laugh. So anyway, let me just pick a paragraph. Let's see. The threshold between Neptune and Aries is the most potent step where life's longing for itself takes new form. Identity and instinctual survival. Imagine the next step in the self-awareness of all life forms. There's a higher intelligence that's going to unfold, which is the ability to be conscious co-creators with Mother Nature. So we are in for a wild ride, and all of creation, all of Gaia is evolving in consciousness. And I, for one, I know that the rocks and the trees and the hills, I know they have consciousness. I think most of us know that as well. They really do. Things that we don't think have consciousness, like your home, your car, even your clothing, there's a sentience to it. Every natural thing and everything that you touch or work with. Okay, enough of that.
Yeah.
So Neptune that ingresses, or any planet that ingresses to Aries, corresponds with the cusp between the 12th and the 1st houses, which symbolizes new evolutionary intent, new creation, and also the birth canal. So we have that going on, and out of chaos, 12th house, birth, new creation, 1st house, Bernadette Brady, who is a Pisces, by the way. This is an opportunity to emerge from seeming chaos, division, and mass polarization to new perspectives, hope, and understanding. Pluto's polarity point is 0 degrees Leo right now, which is approaching conjunction with Neptune's planetary north node of 11 degrees Leo, which is right here. Right here. 11 degrees Leo is Neptune's north node. And before I continue, I just want to say that that's one of the things that I see the most clearly is Neptune's north node in Leo, which is the heart and the consciousness that comes into our inner self through the heart. I think that that's really being heightened right now. We're in a hard time, but these hard times that we're in politically, they make us go really deep within and find out the stuff that we're made out of and what we can really do and what we can really accomplish and how we can really try to do something by sheer intent and will and have it matter in the world. That's the north node of Pisces in Leo, I believe. And Zelensky is a Leo. Watch that man. He is up and coming.
He has Mars retrograde at 0 degrees Leo.
He does?
He does.
Yes.
Well, I have his chart if you want to look at it.
He's in the same cycle, the same type of Mars cycle that we're in right now. He's got Mars retrograde at 0 degrees, and by progression, it's I think like 23 or so. It's direct now in Cancer, like 23 degrees or something like that.
I think that the event that happened on February 28th, I think that's why I'm so upset, because I love the man. He's courageous. He's a wonderful leader and beloved person, and it hurt a lot of us to see him disregarded.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. But there's more to that story. So Neptune goes to Aries. Again, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but if anybody wants to chime in, please do. Neptune is ultimate meaning that we give to life. Here's the stellium right here, his Neptune ingressing to Aries on the 30th of March. Here's the north node of Neptune, which is actually the Pluto polarity point right now at 10 degrees Leo. And I love the part of the chart that is Gemini, Cancer, Leo, because it's so progressive and it's so hopeful. It contains the north node of Uranus, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Neptune. I love this area of the chart. And when you read a personal chart too, or any chart for that matter, you want to look for the evolutionary growth opportunities. And I think in these 3 signs with the north node of the outer planets here. Okay, so let's just continue here. Again, we're talking about the north node of Neptune in Aries. Let me move my slides up here. I had a teacher named Robert Goswolf that I told Jeffrey about, and I gave him a tape by Robert. And I said, how did you like it? And he said it was right on. They paralleled each other so much, and he said, I like the name. So Robert, prior to 2006, he said, we're living in the beginning of the middle of that which cannot be changed. All that does not support birthing, motherhood, growth, life, nurturing, peace, and cooperation will fall away. It cannot survive. The tide is again shifting after some 6,000 years back to the divine feminine that replaces competition and war and destruction and violence. It's a time for building up and planting and community. I'm really waiting for the time when somebody in a war zone hands a loaf of bread or some seeds or some medicine or some vegetables over a fence to someone from the other side, like perhaps in Gaza, over, a chain link fence or a, what do you call it, the wire fences that they have, or somebody in Ukraine, because, near the front lines saying, here's some water, here's some pet food, here's some medicine, here's some fuel, whatever it might be. I am waiting for that. I think that that's on the horizon, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But real quickly, I do want to point out, can you see this chart? I can't see it, the whole chart.
Yes.
You can see
Yes.
Pallas Athene is, bear with me, over here. And she is trine, let's see, waxing trine to Jupiter right now in Gemini. And also, she just passed Pluto in Aquarius. But she is she's the goddess of creative wisdom. And this emphasizes the need to take stock of supplies, cooperate with our communities. Pallas Athene teaches us to prepare for the unknown in times of peace and to strive for peace in times of war. She is a skilled craftsperson and teaches resourcefulness, peaceful sharing, and cooperation. In other words, help your neighbor and you'll be helping yourself.
So let me add on to that. Zelensky is an Aquarius Sun and Venus conjunct at 5 degrees Aquarius, and that's where Pallas Athene is right now, which I find interesting as the world steps up to.
I wonder, would anybody look at his nodal story?
Yeah, I have his chart. If you want to look at it, I have it. It'll be coming up in a minute.
It'll help with his strategy.
Okay. I wish I could get this to work, but I don't know how, so. Gotta get rid of it somehow. Bear with me a moment.
I just want to add one point. You talk about the divine feminine. They're so active right now, whichever divine feminine that you look at. Personally, I've been looking at a lot of Mary Magdalene's, linking it to Christ consciousness. I've been looking at the asteroid Isis and the natural Lilith as well. So, just for the audience, just play around with the asteroids, the divine asteroids, the feminine asteroids. You'll see some links. It's the reawakening of the feminine, right? Meaning the feminine in all of us, which aligns to the matriarchal period in time. So it's sort of like we're being reminded to remember what is natural. And this is why we find ourselves at this transition point. You mentioned
giving
earlier,
birth.
Marty, about, yes, the whole patriarchal period and the matriarchy and that guilt, that the nodal axis right now, we are releasing the man-made guilt. It's
Yes.
man-made. It's not natural. And stepping into the North Node of Neptune is the remembrance of the oneness, the unity that we all possess.
I love
I just
that.
wanted to add that back, the divine feminine that you mentioned. Yeah.
I love that. And as you say that, Rav, I'm also thinking about it's the masculine energy that wrote the story about the divine feminine and what it is.
Of course.
And in fact, the feminine needs to write her own story.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we look at the chart, we look at these planets and we see them as masculine in, like Pluto or Saturn or whatever, but they're both. They have a feminine and a masculine, and we need to write the feminine story for all of these planets too.
Yes,
Well, it's
and
right?
when you look at the Venus star, it's really fascinating to me that the Venus stars, there are 2 right now that are Mars ruled, and they're shifting. The Scorpio one is shifting into Libra. We just had our first Venus star in Libra last year. The Aries one is winding down, and it will move into Pisces, which is the exaltation of Venus. And so I think, you know, what you all are saying is you know, we're headed in that direction. It's just that, you know, the final gasp is upon us, shall we say.
And it's painful.
Yes, we're in labor.
We're in labor. Yeah.
And I see that dance between Pisces and Aries is the contractions, you know, back in the
Mhm.
fourth and the contractions for birth.
Mm-hmm. But it has to happen. I mean, we don't have a choice.
Right.
It's just, do we want to suffer? And how much do we want to suffer? And suffering doesn't mean we don't have pain. I mean, pain doesn't mean that we have to suffer.
Okay.
Well, and we also have our own choice about how we react to things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, all we, you know, one of the few things that we can control is our
Mhm.
reaction to
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
events.
Well, isn't that Mars in Cancer right now for everybody? Conscious awareness of the emotional body and what we're feeling and how we're releasing it. I know Michelle spoke about it beautifully earlier.
Yeah.
And it is. Evolution can only happen through the emotional body, and we have to move through it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how we move through it.
Mhm.
I've just
So-
had my Mars return, so I'm feeling it.
An extended Mars return.
Yes.
I love it.
So what I'm going to do, thank you, as I'm going to go through, finish Neptune to Aries, and I will
Marty,
give it over to,
can you make it full screen before you start?
yeah, bear with me just a moment. Okay, I think that what we have, yeah, chart of the beginning of the Civil War on April 12th, 1861. This is when Neptune last ingressed to Aries on the same day. Some people say it was that Neptune ingressed on the day after the start of the war, but they're one and the same. It's either the 12th or the 13th, depending on how you figure it. But they coincided the start of the Civil War with Neptune's ingression to Aries in 1861. It's interesting to me that Pisces stands for shared blood, shared water. We are all more connected than divided. This was a war of brother against brother on common soil that was not fully comprehended until after the war. And I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to talk too much. But right now we're on the doorstep of when the Civil War was happening in the 1860s. We're right there. And I will tell you that we are in a civil war right now, whether it's
Yes, we are.
conscious or not. Yes, Robin, I know you know. And we feel it, and we're feeling the reverberations of that time. It's you can feel it. I can't think of the right word, but yeah, it's palpable. Here we go.
Yeah, and Uranus and Gemini is going to add to it.
Most likely. So let's go to the next slide here. I can't. Okay, chart of the beginning of world of the Civil War is right here with Neptune ingressing to Pisces, and then we have Neptune's ingression to Aries 2025 right here, as you can see. If anybody wants to talk about that chart, fine. If not, I will move right along. I mean, they're paralleling each other. And again, Neptune at 0 degrees Aries is the most potent degree of new creation and renewed consciousness, the bridge from individuated to spiritual consciousness through the human heart. This to change here. Okay, the Battle of Shiloh. And I'll just read this really, like I said, really quickly. The Neptune first degree of Aries squares the nodes in Gemini, Sagittarius. It's the rule of the South Node. The rule of the South Node, Mercury, is culminating to Neptune in the battle in the Shiloh chart. Ruler of North Node, Jupiter, is opposing ruler in South Node. But what I want to say here is, as tragic as this war is, with brother fighting against brother, with Uranus and Gemini.
Yep.
On American soil, word is starting to circulate via cavalry brigades that the Southern armies are dwindling due to attrition. Strategies are put in place to block supply channels, etc. So here's the Battle of Shiloh, and here's the Battle of Shiloh with December. This is actually, I don't have the full chart, I'm sorry, but this is actually December 21st of 2023 transits, because that's when I did the lecture. So just know that this is the Battle of Shiloh and this interior one as well. And I'm going to go to the next slide.
Let me make a comment here. I find it very telling that the nodal axis are squared.
To where they are now. Yeah.
Yeah, the nodal axis then was Gemini Sag, and now and the rulers were together then as they are now.
Thank you, Sue. That's really astute of you. So this is an interesting story. This was the second and one of the deadliest battles of the Civil War. It actually was the decisive battle of the Civil War. If you know history, and I love history, everybody thinks that the Battle of Gettysburg decided the war, but it was the Battle of Shiloh that made the difference. When it made a marked difference, where you knew which way the war was going at some point. There was and my God, it's like we're right there with Ukraine. We're right on the precipice as well. And it's like brother against brother there as well, because cousin is fighting cousin. There was an unspoken and unannounced brief period of truce that followed as casualties, desertions, and surrenders increased. Men from both sides were reported to have given aid to each other, believe it or not, just to survive, especially from those of both sides who took shelter in a small church near Shiloh, Tennessee. Legend has it that blues and grays sought shelter together there from the storm and hail. Little was said as they shared rations, and there was a wounded Confederate preacher's son who led them in the Lord's Prayer. So what I think is going to happen, and when you look at these charts, this is April 7th, 1862, so we're a year into the war. Neptune is at 1 degree Aries here, and here I have a chart that I think the inner one is April 7th, 1862. I think the outer one is December of 23, because that's when I did the lecture. But believe it or not, what happened is that people shared shelter, and they shared scripture and food, and there was a communion. And then word got out about that, and the war turned. People no longer wanted to fight against brother because of the stories that they heard about the shelter in Shiloh. And the shelter in Shiloh did not end well. It was overtaken by Confederate forces, and few escaped, but those that did told their story and really helped bring an end to the war. Because what the brothers, all of the brothers, so to speak, realize is we're fighting somebody else's war. We don't want to fight this war. It's not our war. So let's see if I can see this problem. I have a problem reading it. Just a moment. March 20. Oh, here we are in the eclipses. So if anybody wants to take the eclipses, feel free. Go right ahead.
Is there anything anybody wants to comment on the other charts before we move into the eclipses?
No.
I could talk about the eclipses a little bit before I have to sign off here.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the fascination of this particular eclipse cycle is around the retrogrades I talked about a little bit. I have on my YouTube channel, I did like a part 1 and a part 2 retrograde just review, because that's essentially the big signature of this eclipse season. But we've got, the lunar eclipse. Whenever I see the moon preparing to cross the south node, for me, it's like, get ready to release whatever it is that is related to that south node. So relative to Virgo, we're talking about patriarchal conditioning, inferiority, places where we hold guilt, emotional residue of feeling inadequacy, not good enough, because all of that just gets in the way of where we're called to go. You know, it's sort of like if you're needing to move house, the more stuff you have to take with you, the harder it is to move. The more you purge and clean and get rid of stuff before you have to move, the better it is. Because then you're going to be more likely to start fresh. And same with any kind of relationship change. The more you let go of pain, hurt, resentment, unforgiveness relative to any place where you've been carrying immense suffering, physical pain, emotional pain, whatever it is, the more you spend time letting that go emotionally. We have this beautiful grand trine between Saturn, Mars, and Vesta. So I feel like that reflects this capacity for us to understand and see more of a divine and sacred purpose of the suffering that we've experienced in our life. And it leads to this capacity for greater meaning making that's rooted in a faith that whatever I went through served a purpose. And now I'm here being asked to let it go, being asked to let go of any limiting beliefs that I have about it, etc., before being catapulted literally into a new reality that means that I can't take very much more with me than what is absolutely necessary. And whether that's, you know, happening now or 6 months from now or, you know, over the course of the next 18 years, because that's the longer cycle relative to this nodal cycle, we can know that what we're being prepared for and primed and in this particular time is that next level. I was talking to somebody earlier today where it's like all of the early childhood trauma is coming back up right now. And why is that? Well, that's because it's got to go, you know, in order for her to have the experience that she'd want to have of emotionally healthy, mature, loving connection in her relationships and in her environment, right? It's just, these are the kind of things that we face.
I love that.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at the Sabian symbols?
No.
Because I'm wondering, I've not looked, I'm just curious about what the Sabian symbols are for these eclipses.
Well, all I checked was, Maria, that the Saros cycle is 123. And I'm personally still doing a lot of research into those cycles to understand the deeper meaning. But I know that might be linked to the Sabian symbol, but I'm not, I didn't actually look deeper into that. But I just wanted to add, is just from what Michelle just mentioned as well, that closing cycle, especially with the moon in the south node. As I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at the asteroids, and I know it's not highlighted here, but for example, the Magdalene asteroid is at 24 degrees of Taurus on the day of that lunar eclipse. So it's conjunct that Uranus in Taurus. So that I feel is quite powerful, you know, especially because it'll be trining that south node of the moon. And I feel it's related to the guilt, related to the divine feminine in even how Mary Magdalene was presented in the world, releasing ourselves from the guilt if we thought and projected, you know, that she wasn't as the church presented her back in the day, and it's forgiving ourselves. I think this lunar chart is saying forgive yourself, and you release yourself from those judgments, those beliefs that we've held through lifetimes. You know, that Pluto and Aquarius transit is where we're linking back to the previous Aquarian age and forgiving ourselves for all the past mistakes. And there's an opportunity to do things in a different way this time around. But we have to do it in a very conscious way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
And
found
actually,
I found the Sabian symbol,
oh, good.
and it for 24 Virgo, it's Mary and her little lamb.
Oh,
And the keynote is the need to keep a vibrant and pure simplicity at the core of one's being as one meets the many tests of existence.
29 degrees of Taurus. Magdalene asteroid on that day.
I
That
love
is
bringing
perfect.
the Magdalene asteroid, because that points to one of those stories where we've been told about a central thing. And Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Jesus's life, I think of as very much Virgo Pisces. He was Pisces. He was the son of God. He was about forgiveness and unconditional love. And the church or the people, were Virgo. And so much of the stories that we believe, even the biblical scriptures, became distorted in the patriarchal conditioning so that we lost connection with what a miracle it was that there was this woman there witnessing, him, and that she carried that legacy, that awakening inside of her. I went last year to France, to her grotto, and I'm very much called to return this year. And I know we've spoken about this, but I feel like unlearning those stories, unlearning the guilt. Jeffrey talks
Yes.
about learned guilt versus, conditioned guilt. And it's such a powerful thing that we have to do in order to actually understand what's true.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what do you do when you marry that energy of Pisces and Virgo together? When it's operating at its highest together. You get the mother pregnant with the child, which is the Christ child within.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that is quite powerful. And when I look at the moon in on March 13th, conjunct that south node, when you're going to heal and you're going to go to Mary, you actually have to go to the Black Madonna to heal. And when I see, because you're looking at purity and you're looking at needing to release. And so it is the Black Madonna where you actually release. Um, and yeah.
Oh, I looked up the Sabian symbol for the South Node during that eclipse, and it's a bald-headed man. At times, we can no longer accept the way things are and feel impelled to take executive action, even at the cost of disturbing the status quo. Honing the will to exceptional levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Astrology doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't. I mean, we have to, and my goodness, there's so many interpretations, but they, that I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Moving right along, we've got a couple more to get to. Saturn ingress to Aries, we already did that. And here we have Saturn to Aries again, I believe.
Yes, that's what you have there.
Jupiter to Cancer. Anybody want to take it?
Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, wow. It's happening on June 9th. I love June 9th. That's my birthday.
Beautiful Gemini birthday.
Yeah.
Great solar return.
Mm-hmm. But it actually, well, my solar return ends up being at 2951, I think. But still, this is good.
And maybe we can even approach this even more in our next talk. But
Yeah, because we're already at past.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I
moving
think,
right
I think
along
that's
here.
I think that's a good idea because it's
Save it for part 3.
Okay. And then, of course, Uranus to Gemini. And
more to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Because with Uranus to Gemini, I think we could talk for at least another hour. Just with that transit. But yeah.
Let's see what
been
else we
great.
have here. Uranus to Gemini. Okay, if anybody wants to address this chart, otherwise I have some closing words that I can share?
Yeah,
It's
I think we ought to move towards wrapping it up.
Yeah, and we'll pick up with Jupiter and Cancer and Uranus and Gemini next
Mhm.
time.
Okay. So real quickly here, what I said in the beginning is that we know this, but we do not remember this, that our moment of conception, we were a flash of lightning. And this is given to us by Zach Bush, who is a researcher in soil and water ecosystems, human genomics, immunity, and gut and brain health. And he's a hospice physician. I mean, he's just an all-around
It's amazing.
biologist, medical person, scientist, pro-life, for life. He's for life everywhere.
I love it.
And what I want to say is, we know this, but we do not remember this. There was a time during your fetal development when you were a human heart and nothing else. And the reason that I put this in here is because I really feel the Neptune North Node at 10 degrees Leo. It really speaks to me. I can feel it. That in one instance, that heart began to beat and in uniform, human development began to emerge out of that organ. The blueprint was there. And the first thing to emerge out of that stage of the beating heart, believe it or not, is the tip of the tongue. And so this journey begins. We need to go back to nature and be cuddled by her, because she put in her soils 60 million years ago the antidote to glyphosate that would destroy her soils today. There is an antidote to our biggest mistakes sitting beneath our feet, and that is my definition of grace, and makes me glad to be alive with you. And those are Zach's words. But there are antidotes to some of our biggest mistakes all around us, and they're with getting back to nature and holding her and letting her hold you as you are an infant, naked and needing to be hugged and totally vulnerable. We need to get back to that balance. And I believe that that's a lot of what Neptune's North Node in Leo represents. And one last word, I just want to say, why do we strive to preserve democracy and our freedoms and conserve our earth and all of Gaia? We do it for our children. This is a photograph of the beginning of the Ukrainian war, and a little boy. It says this is 3 years old, and a little boy hugging his toy rabbit. And it sums it all up. Why do we do, any of us, why do we strive? Why do we carry on? Why do we do what we do? We do it for the children and the dream of the next generation. So don't forget to dream in this time of Neptune, and let yourself dream big and really dream peace, because it is possible.
Awesome,
And
Marty. Thank you.
you are welcome. Thank you.
And we will look forward to the next installment coming in a month or two.
Great. I'll start working on it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, everyone. Thanks so much, Robin and Sue, and
Yes.
Rob and